My name is Alicia Lowry, and I own Embracing Your Branches. So I started this as a personal family, history, doing this all for my son, and then started my business about a year ago after helping a friend of mine find her biological family using DNA clustering. It was a closed adoption. So that was just a moment where I realized that I wanted to be able to do this and help people. However, today I won't be covering adoption or unknown parentage. I'm actually going to be using a case study from my own personal family tree. It was what got me really into brick wall research. And that's how I ended up learning as much as I did, because this was a multi-year project. I will have all my contact information at the end of the presentation in case you guys have more questions. Feel free to, obviously we're going to have a Q&A, but feel free to reach out to me later, if you think of something else. But hopefully this will be helpful to somebody. This is actually a quote from Henry Wine. I'm actually not 100% sure how to pronounce his name, but it really spoke to me because of how passionate I am about brick wall research. And it's genealogy becomes a mania, an obsessive struggle to penetrate the past and snatch meaning from an infinity of names. At some point, the search becomes futile. There's nothing left to find. No meaning to be dredged out of old receipts, newspaper articles, letters, accounts of events that seemed so important 50 or 70 years ago. All that remains is the insane urge to keep looking. Insane because the searcher has no idea what he seeks. What will it be? A photograph, a will, a fragment of a letter? The only way to find out is to look at everything, because it's often when the searcher has gone far beyond the border of futility, he finds the object he never knew he was looking for. I only share that because that is this entire research project in a nutshell. Because how it all started was actually a packet of family history information that came from my paternal grandmother. She was doing research on our family. This packet was dated in 1975. So obviously before the internet, before we have all the resources that we have today. And this particular line really caught my eye because it just dead ended. The rest of my family lines, we knew where they came from, or at least, a rough idea, and went many more generations past this. So I decided I want to pick up where she left off. And so Philip Dietz was an immigrant from Germany. And a lot of the information that she had was really conflicting once I started getting into it. It all started with me just kind of doing data entry into what she had into my ancestry family tree, because I think that's where a lot of people start. And I was finding information on this family and sources and records to add on. And it really struck me that there was so much conflicting information. So I dove in. So here's kind of the process that I used, some advice that I can give. And also I'm going to be covering mistakes that I made, because I was a brand newbie family historian at the time and was really just adding the easy stuff, the low-hanging fruit, doing data entry, and hadn't really done any true research. So start off, familiarize yourself with research that has or has not been done. So I dug through all of these papers that she had and scoured it for as much information as I could, and then started to try and find the records to back all of that up. Filling in those gaps, you want to take advantage of all possible resources, because we have such a wealth of information out there, and it's not all in one place. A lot of these are obvious things that you guys probably use all the time, but maybe there are a few things that I can add to that. Family history libraries are obviously a great one, though. Thank you, Allen County Public Library, for inviting me here today. And thank you for doing all of these presentations for us weekly. It's so helpful. Maps I'll talk about more later, just because I am obsessed with using maps in research. They can provide so much more information than you would think. Lineage societies are great as well. So if you are a part of the Sons of the American Revolution, Daughters of the American Revolution, etc., feel free to reach out to them, because they have their own repositories and own libraries. So that are generally only accessible by members, though I know with the DAR I'm a member of, non-members can go to their library, but I think you have to be a member to access them online. With this particular case study, these are a list of the resources that I used, and it was quite extensive. And I would not have been able to find the answers that I was looking for without each and every one of these. I'm not 100% sure if it's a complete list, but it's large enough already. When I got started, obviously, I was filling in as much information as I possibly could, because I wanted to be able to find where Philip Dietz came from and, hopefully his parents in the process. But there were no records that were giving me any more information than what was here in the United States. He had, based off of a divorce record from his second wife, he had, his own words, said how long he had been in the United States. So he had immigrated roughly in 1854, but there weren't any other records between then and the 1860 census that had any mention of him. So that was kind of the point in time that I had everything from 1860 and beyond. So because I had found all of that information on him and still really found no connection back to Germany, I ended up just starting to try and research everything else. So researching location, the area and time period where your ancestor is living, is super important, because there will be information like socially, culturally, and historically that will help you put yourself in their shoes and provide insight on where you may be able to find more information, more records, more sources, such as, the churches that they went to or things like that. Another great thing is location-specific repositories are super useful. I worked with the Lancaster Historical Society, the Lancaster County Archives, and Lancaster History Museum constantly. I'm sure they got tired of hearing from me, because I was requesting records all the time. And, they were all so kind, but having access to them was invaluable to me. Speaking of location, I just can't stress enough how important it is to family history research. So this photo is actually a photograph of Philip Dietz's house that he built. I was able to take this picture personally. And actually, the records surrounding this house were part of the reason I was able to break through this brick wall. Here are a couple of options and ways that you can research location. Some of them, again, are obvious, but others may not be. So compiled family histories from that area, whether it's your family or not, can actually be super beneficial, because a lot of times, compiled family histories are telling a story of a family. So you may be able to, find information on that area, like what was happening socially, culturally, were there, what did that family's life look like that was in the same area, potentially same religion, potentially same origin. City directories are another one that aren't always obvious, because I mean, I know we use them to find people and addresses, neighbors all the time. However, generally or oftentimes in the beginning of city directories, you're going to find information about that location, historical, topographical, and like statistical information about the the state, the county, the townships. They'll give you information about which specific areas, how they voted, or how it was, started. Did one township split off from another one and become a different area, and what year that happened? Which is great when you're researching someone from a township and all of a sudden they've moved. Well, it could just be that it was a new township created from an existing one. Another fairly new tool that we have in the genealogy community is AI, and I know all the talk around it. However, I have used it so many times. You can ask questions based off of specific parameters. For example, I just typed in why were so many Germans immigrating to Lancaster, Pennsylvania in the 1850s, and it just gives me an outline of different options that I can then research and like look up sources and like factual evidence. This is obviously not something that you're going to use as a source. However, it gives you a jumping off point to be able to follow through on the research. Even after finding as much information as I could about Philip Dietz, I still really didn't have anything connecting it, obviously. So I started researching all the people that they would have lived with or worked with and trying to find anybody that was connected to him. Even if they're not related, then you can still see like the communities that they were a part of, the languages that they had in common, like the origin. A lot of times people move together or live together, like I said, related or not. In that 1860 census that I mentioned, there were two other people in Philip's household, and that was Peter Dietz and Christian Dietz. At least that was the way that it was spelled. And it seemed that they all had the same last name. So I could have made the assumption that was a mother or a brother, but was not 100% sure. And since I was having no luck with Philip, I started researching, looking for this Christian and Peter. And I could not find anything about Christian, who, by the way, in the next census, 1870, was living there. And her name was actually Christina in that census. Cover that further, though. So I focused on trying to find Peter, and as much as information as I could about him. There were unfortunately several Peter Dietzes living in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, or the surrounding areas, though. The difference was that with this Peter Dietz having been born in Germany, or Hesse-Darmstadt, two of the three Peters were not born in Germany. However, there was a third, but he had been born 30 years prior to the Peter Dietz in the census. So I was constantly searching and hunting and searching for this Peter Dietz, and I couldn't find anything about him. I would run down a rabbit trail and find a record of a Peter Dietz that didn't have like an age or a birth location, and eventually find out that, oh, that's not him. So what I decided to do after wasting many, many hours of my time, days, weeks, looking for him is I actually started an entire family tree, like a private family tree, to research all of the Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and surrounding areas, the Dietzes, all the Dietzes in that area, and everyone connected to them. So I started saving all these records that I was finding to these different families so that I could reference them later. So if I found a new record, well, did I find it already and it's connected to somebody else? Oh, yes, no. And then I could follow along with that. But it gave me an easy way to track my research in a time where I didn't have any like formal like research, tracking, spreadsheets, anything like that, technically research, whatever you call it, where you keep a log, research logs, excuse me, couldn't think of that word. But that was so beneficial and so time saving because I was just grasping at straws. So what I ended up running across was this Peter Dietz here, John Peter Dietz, but again, born 30 years prior in Germany. This is a rundown of his family, just a little for anyone who's a visual person like I am. So what I ended up happening is while I was doing tons of research on him, because most of who I was finding when I was like searching for Peter Dietz from Germany was him. So I was running across everything about him. So I had a lot of information. I ended up finding a family tree on GeneNet that had him and his family in there. And it was actually being compiled by a genealogist in Germany who was working on this area that he was from, Wallerstadt. So it was basically an entire tree full of people from there. And this is what it looked like. So I was looking at that as a reference so that I could start finding like the proof and the sources of how all these people were connected. And I ended up finding that in this tree, and you can see it right here. So here is this John Peter, and then his father. Well, it turned out that he actually had a half brother, Johannes, and then who married Anna Christina Kraft. So as I'm looking through all of this, I realized that she had no death date. It just said unknown in the United States. And she had 3 children with her first husband, Johannes Dietz, Adam, Maria, and then Philip. Adam and Maria had death dates, whereas Philip did not. And then she also remarried and had a son, Johann Peter Horst. The crazy part to me was that I was not looking for my Philip. However, I realized that there was so much kind of like similarities between these 3, this Philip, Anna Christina Kraft, and John Peter Horst, to the 3 people that I had in my 1860 census. I didn't want to jump to conclusions though, so I just kind of put it on the back burner, kept doing research, and just kind of kept an eye out for any information I could find on them. But it got so crazy and coincidental, the more I found, I actually started making a comparison chart because I wanted to prove or disprove that this, whether this was or was not my great-great-grandfather, Philip. So this is somewhat what it looked like because I was doing side-by-side comparisons, same birth years, similar birth locations, even things like the Peter Dietz from my family was only seen in the 1860 census, whereas John Peter Horst had immigrated before 1860. I had actually found an immigration record for him and his mother both coming to the United States, specifically Lancaster. And I couldn't find him in the 1860 census. And also, on that note, I could never find anything about Anna Christina Kraft here there in Lancaster. It just seemed like even though she had immigrated here with her son, she was just gone. So I started obviously researching all of these people, and I found out that everybody here highlighted in red had actually immigrated from Wallerstadt and here to Lancaster, Pennsylvania, where Philip and Peter Horst had both come to. It just seemed like a crazy coincidence. Continuing on the filling in the gaps. This is where we go to, you want to make sure that they look at the people they live close to. Like I said earlier, this house here, this is actually land ownership map from 1875. And so this right here is actually my great-great-grandfather, Philip Dietz. And I was just so excited to find his name on a map that I freaked out and didn't really pay too much attention to anybody else that was there. And now this was prior to finding this other family. But once I started researching the Dietz, Kraft, and Horst families, I ended up realizing that they were all living in the same area. Here is actually I have all of the arrows pointing to the locations that they lived. And it was crazy to me as soon as I realized that this John Landau and John Stom were actually the husbands of Anna Catherine Dietz and Barbara Dietz, which this is a portion of that tree that I had posted a minute ago. And this is basically just showing how that tree was connected to this specific street, Rockland Street. They were either neighbors or just around the corner. So that's where we get to don't ignore the small stuff. And I mean, cosigners, witnesses, lenders, landlords, and speaking of landlords or lenders, this John Landau actually was the man who sold Philip Dietz his house on Rockland Street. But the crazy part is that I had found a newspaper article where Philip was requesting water lines to his property on Rockland Street in the late 1860s, but he had not actually purchased the land from John Landau until 1872. So that was years before. Normally, when you buy property and you are building a house, you start all of that after you purchased it. So it seemed weird and coincidental, again, that he had purchased property after he was already working on it. So here's some more of the small stuff. I actually have the different families here from that tree and all of the coincidences that I had found. They're all buried in the same cemetery. A couple of them are actually very, very close to Philip's plot. They were obviously all neighbors, like I just said. And then John Landau selling Philip the house. But also I was able to find connections within their church as well. Most of this family they were members of the St. Stephen's Lutheran Church, which was started in 1874. And that was obviously going to be a small startup church. It was a break off from a different Lutheran church there in the city. So John Landau, John Stom, and then the father, John Peter Dietz, they were actually founding members. Some of them were elders, and so very involved in this church. So this was actually the church where Philip's children were baptized and confirmed. One of the other members, John Ox, was the witness on Philip's naturalization. And then the pastor, Reverend E. Meister, officiated Philip's second marriage after his first wife passed. And his first wife and his oldest daughter both had their funerals there. So they were members there as well. So this is actually an overview, like an aerial view of the cemetery. It is a much larger cemetery than what it looks like. But having zoomed in, you can see it is a lot closer than it appears in this picture. So they were obviously buying plots that were near each other, like the Stom family, the Vader family, Borngesser, and Dietz family. Again, just more coincidences. And this is kind of where I moved into the DNA side of things. This is the reason that I took a DNA test to begin with, is because, and then kind of bullied my dad into taking one as well, because I wanted a closer generation. So I didn't have any true proof, just circumstantial evidence. So I wanted to see if there was a potential that I had DNA matches that came from this family. So what I ended up finding, I went and I searched for Horst because I figured that was my best bet. And I found some Horsts that had no trees, but they were a part of a cluster. So I ended up expanding the descendant, like doing research on the descendants of Peter Horst, and finding that this cluster was actually, in fact, connected. And I also had access to my father's first cousin's DNA test as well. So I was doing comparison on this, and it was super similar. Even the amount of shared DNA was what it should be for this relations in that age range. And I'll go ahead and pull that back. So pulling information from DNApainter.com, love them, is these are the statistics for probable relationships up here at the top of the page. So these are the ranges for half, third, cousin, once removed and twice removed. And then I know this is a lot of numbers, but what it shows, because of using my father's DNA test, his cousin's DNA test, and then a combination of both of them, is that the ranges of the potential relationships were within a range for those DNA matches that I found in that horse cluster. At a certain point, that was really all I had as far as like evidence. And I was pretty confident, honestly, that I had found the family, but I had no true connection. I had no record or not even a newspaper article, anything that connected Philip to this family. It seemed likely, because based off of the mountains of circumstantial evidence. But I was still kind of disappointed because I am a stickler for proof, and I was hoping for a nail in the coffin, and I got duct tape and super glue, and that just wasn't good enough for me. So I put it down for a little while, and at some point picked it all back up in order to work on my own compiled family history for the Philip Dietz and his descendants. So I had already had this record, and this was an immigration record from the archive in Germany. So it ended up, I had used this as a reference in there because this is proving that he immigrated to the United States. But what I had not done, because I was very new at the time, is actually request the original document, the original like source material. So I reached out to Hessen-Darmstadt archives and just asked, if they had this right here under annotations. This record was from an immigration letter from 1886. And I wasn't sure what that would be and if there would be anything in it, but what I ended up learning from that experience working with the archivist, since I was still fairly new, was we must communicate clearly exactly what we're looking for when we're speaking with librarians or archivists. I reached out and just asked for this record, and she responded and said, well, this record collection contains several hundred pages for 55 people with the last name Kraft. Can you give me a little bit more information? Of course, I was shocked, but I actually gave her an explanation of what specifically I was looking for, information on Philip Dietz and potential proof that he was, the brother of Peter Horst and the son of Anna Christina Kraft, and gave her some dates and everything. She was a lovely person. She actually sent me more than what I had asked for because I gave her the information that I did. So she not only included letters from a letter from Philip Dietz here. This is what I ended up with. This beautifully old handwritten letter with the address that he lived at. Now, this letter was written to his aunt, Anna. She was still alive, even though Anna Christina Kraft had passed by that point. And it was a letter back to Germany. She also included letters from Peter Horst to that very same aunt. And in both of these letters, these brothers mentioned each other. So this was the nail in the coffin that I had been looking for. She also sent a letter from her estate when they were doing all of the legal, stuff to be able, these are living relatives of Maria Kraft from when she passed. And all of this is obviously in German, but I did have a lovely fellow genealogist that was researching this family that I worked with, transcribe and then translate all of this for me. So number 3 is Peter Horst, son of Anna Christina Kraft. And number 4, Philip Dietz, son of Christina Kraft. So what I was then able to do is put him in his rightful place in the family tree. However, I will cover some mistakes that I made in the process because I'm new and I'm still not perfect and I make mistakes to this day, but I assumed in the very beginning that all the information my grandmother had was accurate. And that was the wrong place to start and why it took me so long to figure out in the first place that I was even looking at the right family. Thinking that all sources hold the same value. One of the things that you have to take into consideration when looking at them is that obviously censuses were taken by unrelated people. We all know this. However, looking at a death certificate and looking at the informant, were they close family, direct family, friends, neighbors? It really just depends on who is recording that document to see how heavily you can accept, what's being said. Obviously, and I'm not going to cover each and every one of these because y'all can read, but I learned my lesson with not requesting the original source documents. I've seen many, many times going through that an index or a translation, transcription are off. And so always request original source documents because you never know if what you're looking at even has all the information that's in the original. Review your research frequently, because as I went along, I spent years on this project. And had I been reviewing what I had more often, I would have most likely seen that link to be able to receive the letters way earlier. Because at a certain point, I would have noticed that a lot sooner had I been reviewing. Another thing, don't just search indexed record collections. Family Search specifically has a ton of images and unindexed record collections that you can still, find by location area. Those are huge. And if you know of a record collection that could potentially have information on your ancestor, or if you don't, you can reference the research wiki, then you can generally tend to find information on them fairly quickly, just as long as you're looking in the right location, year, etc. And then not asking for help or reaching out to others researching the same family. I have a list of people who were invaluable to me in this research project. And whether it was genealogists or other family historians or, people working within archives, repositories, libraries. Reaching out and asking for help, you never know what you could potentially find. Even family members, I was able to find for a different family line a box larger than my head full of family history documents that an aunt had in her attic. So ask around, send a message to that person, that family member you've never met, reach out to a local genealogist to, like I did, to get photographs of the gravestones for this family. I'll just kind of leave on a lighter note because that is the majority of what I had to say. But I'm sure as we all, if any of all of y'all have worked on brick walls, I will leave you with an actual image of me working on this on this research project. Oh wait, no, that's not me. Never mind. But it's exactly what I looked like. Anyway, I look forward to the Q&A. I know that there may have been things that I missed because of how extensive this research project was. Years and years of spaghetti research, as I like to call it. But if you do have any questions that later on, feel free to reach out and contact me. My phone, even if I don't answer the phone, leave me a voicemail, but email is most likely the best way to get a hold of me. And I would love to chat with you, whether about this or something else. Thank you very much again.
One question was, when did you realize that you needed to turn to DNA?
I realized I needed to turn to DNA when I ran out of. Basically, I had heavily researched all of these people, not just what I knew was my family. I had researched this entire family that I had that slide of, and found, I'm telling you, I had 20, 30 sources, newspapers, directories, censuses, like birth, that whole 9 yards, marriage. I had as much as I could potentially find. And I still had zero connection. Like, I have basically built the life stories of most of these people, but there was no document or record that actually connected Philip to any of them outside of maybe a social interaction. There was no actual record of him being related at all. And because of that, that's when I turned to DNA, because I wanted something that could tell me whether there was a connection. And so that is, again, and that's also how I started learning how to do work on DNA clustering. I probably spent thousands of hours at this point doing, like, watching seminars and lectures and, presentations just like this, learning as much as I could so that I could actually use the DNA matches effectively.
What are the best resources for DNA? Beyond just getting the DNA test, what do you use?
I generally prefer working with tests from ancestry.com. Mainly because they do not transfer DNA tests in, but they will transfer them out. However, I also like to use, obviously, DNA Painter. I pulled the statistics from there. And then Banyan DNA is another one that I have been working with recently that can deal with more complex relations, whether more like complex connections, whether it is like cousin marriages or, back in when people were first settling, there was a lot of intermixing of families. And so it's a lot easier to work with than, say, DNA Painter, because you can make connections through cousins and actually visualize them, unlike, building a tree on Ancestry. But I use both of those very frequently. And then also I am a spreadsheet nerd. So I have created cluster spreadsheets that I use to color code. However, I mean, different websites that like Ancestry and MyHeritage, they do have their own built-in. I know Ancestry definitely does. I haven't used MyHeritage. MyHeritage is clustering like software, but Ancestry does have their own color coding system that you can very easily find like tutorials on like YouTube videos.
How do you suggest starting the search for German records? They have somebody that their family came over in 1960. The living family over there is unwilling to help, and the records aren't open to the public. So, very limited information. Have you done more recent research in Germany?
Not in recent times, not in like the 1900s. However, I was able to pull these, or not pull, I was able to get these letters and these records just by reaching out personally via email to the Hessen archives, and they were super helpful, and it was actually quite easy. If you know a specific location, then I would look for the archives in that location and reach out to them and see if they have any information. However, with it being in like the 1960s, I'm not sure how recent they would have information for.
I also put a suggestion in there for them to
Okay, perfect.
contact the Association of Professional Genealogists. Um,
Absolutely.
find somebody over there. That you can't get any better than boots on the ground.
No, you really can't. No, you can't. That's why I've worked with people and directly. I worked with someone directly in Lancaster, a genealogist there. Worked with somebody in Salt Lake City, Utah, somebody over in Germany as well. I mean, just find resources locally if you need to hire a genealogist there. Like that would be even better than working with family, to be honest.
You mentioned a site that they didn't get the name of, something like GeniaNet. Could you clarify
Of
the site's name?
Sheenanet, yes, I can actually. So this is Jeanette right here. I'll just let you see that. But it is personal family trees. So obviously, if you're looking at a family tree, you want to confirm the information that they have in there. Do your own research, use your own sourcing, and like confirm, you know, because while I was doing all of this, I did not want to put more like incorrect information out into the universe, which is why I spent a long time not connecting Philip to this family from Wallerstatten, because I just didn't want to be just another person throwing incorrect information out there and causing confusion. So if you do go on GeneNet and look at the family trees there, just make sure you're doing your own research to confirm that it is accurate.
Someone's commenting that they have Dietz, Horse, and Vetter that lived in Ohio during the 1840s to 1900s.
Yes. So I have actually been working towards attempting to connect those families. I have not yet. I know exactly which families you're talking about because they were one of the Dietz families that I ended up ruling out as a direct family because of them being in Ohio. However, reach out to me, because if I find that information, shoot me an email, because I am working on that one too on my own personal time. So if I find anything, I will definitely let you know.
The charts and spreadsheets that you mentioned earlier, what ones do you use specifically?
As far as like Excel versus Google, or
Mhm.
well, I have done, but I started out just using Google Sheets, and it's free. Highly recommend. I do have Microsoft Office now, so I use Excel because you can do a little bit more with the like equations in there to do connections. But honestly, I created these charts and spreadsheets in PowerPoint. You can use pretty much anything, like anything that is a spreadsheet. It doesn't have to be specific.
This person says that ancestry shows a potential DNA match to their great-great-great-grandfather, but can't get a response from any of the matches, not even
Okay.
those with public trees. Do you have any tips on how to reach out or what to do from there?
You can be kind of like creeperish and go into their trees and leave comments with questions on specific people. They'll most likely get an email that way. Otherwise, I do adoption research. So I have found people with these skill sets that I use, family members via the internet and public records that I have reached out to by telephone. I don't recommend being kind of stalkerish, but I have done that before and found people's phone numbers from public records on the internet to be able to get in contact with them. Fortunately, nobody's been upset about it because they were direct family, but that we were just estranged from. So that's a tough one because you don't want to like harass anybody, but I would try outside of the messaging. Go and leave a comment on their public tree on the person that you're actually asking them about in the message. And then, hopefully they will reply to that comment.
So appreciative that you've been able to join us today, and hopefully we'll see you on Thursday. So have a good rest of your day. Bye.
Perfect. Wonderful. Thanks for coming, y'all.